Here we go, OverDrive. Off and running TSN 1050 on the TSN app. Your home smart speaker up on TSN Plus. Brian Hayes, Frankie Corrado. What a beautiful Friday afternoon it's turned out to be. Ugly this morning, but beautiful this afternoon in Toronto. Canadians are smiling. Very smiley this afternoon, aren't we, Frankie? Feeling good.
Doesn't it just feel, since the rain went away, the sun came out, and it's golden, Hayes. It's golden around Canada right now, and more specifically the GTA where we are, but that was pretty cool to watch today.
Yeah, the 4x100 meter men's, they end up winning gold. They were expected to compete. For sure. They were definitely expected to compete, but I don't think they were expected to win it. The Americans, I think, were going to be heavy favorites. Noah Lyles, though, obviously pulled out. Although he ran the 200-meter with COVID, and then when he finished with bronze, he made sure the world knew that he had COVID, basically trying to either excuse or explain, whichever way you want to decipher it, why he didn't win it, even though he talked such a big game. And then he pulls himself out of the 4x100. The Americans were a disaster today. They finished 7th. They ended up getting disqualified. And Canada ends up winning gold. Andre de Grasse ends up with his 7th medal. That ties now Penny Oleksiak for the most hardware ever for a Canadian at the Summer Games. Just an incredible career he's had. And he had a tough run, right, with the 100 and the 200. He couldn't qualify for the final in either. But here he shows up with his teammates, and they are golden. The 4x100, it's an incredible story. And now stuff's starting to come out, I guess, from the World Championships where Noah Lyles was talking smack about Canada after the States won the 4x100 meter. And we actually have the clip. You want to hear this?
I've seen it multiple times, but we have to play it. Yeah, we got to play this thing.
This is a great Canadian moment because this is what we talked about yesterday. I was talking about this with Struddy. I think this certainly applies in Canada, likely around the world. 90% of your energy is focused simply on Canadian athletes, and you just want them to do well. Go over there and perform, put up a good effort, put forth, a good face, act with integrity, be a great Canadian over there, do whatever you can. If you win gold, silver, bronze, awesome. If not, at least you tried. We love you, and that's what we're tracking. The other 10% of the energy is directed towards the Americans and watching them fail if they do, right? And yesterday, I think a lot of people were watching the U.S. play Serbia on the men's side of basketball thinking this could get awry. This would be a great story, right? There'll be a summit down in the States. LeBron and company couldn't beat the Serbs, couldn't beat Jokic. They end up coming back. They win that. I think they win gold now. It's probably going to be all good. But when you have a Canadian moment like this where Canada wins gold, the States fall apart, the States were heavily favored, and this is what happened at the World Championships when Noah Lyles was asked about the rivalry between the States and Canada in the 4x100 meter.
Rivalry between yourselves and Canada, is that something that we can look forward to going forward?
Rivalry between who?
Canada and yourself. That's a budding rivalry and something we want to look at.
Who?
Canada.
Who?
So, talking a lot of smack, man. A lot of smack. Noah Lyles and the Americans. Who? As if he doesn't even know who he's talking about. Well, he knows now because the Grasse and company lapped the Americans, lapped everyone else for that matter, and
they puked all over themselves, Hayes.
They really did.
They puked all over themselves because they had the bad handoff with the baton. They ended up getting disqualified anyways, and it couldn't have looked worse for them, and it couldn't have looked better for Canada because there's Canada, not expected to win the gold. I think people still had high hopes for this group, and they're in the outside lane. And I think part of the being in the outside lane, it feels like you're not in the middle of it. Like as you turn that corner, you could be a little bit behind. Andre de Grasse, who has been a little bit banged up, like he even admitted to it, like having a little bit of the hamstring injury flare-up, he was flying. It was flawless. It was perfectly executed from the start to the finish, all the handoffs, and Andre de Grasse putting the thing away. Unbelievable. What a cool Canadian moment that we were able to see today.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the games. It just keeps coming and coming, right? And now we got beach volleyball, which is starting in about 25 minutes late, man. 10:30 p.m. start in Paris.
Under the lights?
Under the lights of the Eiffel Tower. So that's going on later this hour. We'll be tracking that. Clara Hanna's going to be calling that. Clara will join us in a couple of hours after the match to break that down, get her take on the whole Olympic Games. But, really cool scene. Like, really, really cool scene. The 4x100 meter. And it just, again, it brings you back. We were talking about this earlier in the week when Donovan Bailey joined us, when, Donovan won gold, obviously, in 96, and then they won the 4x100, and they lapped the field, too. Like, it was kind of a similar feeling. Like, they were out in front. They just kept rolling. And once Bailey got the baton, it was like, it's over. And I had the same feeling with the Grasse. My wife and I were watching it, and it was tough because they were in the last lane. They were in the 9th lane. And it was
way over there.
Yeah, it's so tough to get a real gauge on, how far ahead they are. And when DeGrasse got the baton, he had a step on a couple of competitors, and he did not look back. He turned the burners on and see you later.
Did he ever, man?
And
you know what?
Incredible.
It's weird. Does it feel weird for you not seeing like the Jamaicans and like Usain Bolt at the head of the field there? Like, it does feel like now it is so up for grabs, and obviously Canada grabs it, but it's not something we're used to, really. Just having it be so up for grabs like that.
2008, 2012, 2016, Jamaicans, they just lapped the field. Like, Bolt won gold, and usually a countryman finished either second or third, in the 100, the 200 in terms of the Jamaicans, and then obviously they also won the 4x100, and you're right. They were not really a part of the program here. It was supposed to be the Americans. It turned out it wasn't, and the Canadian men end up winning the 4x100 meters. So just an awesome, awesome scene in Paris today. And again, more and more medals coming in daily, and we'll be tracking the beach volleyball as we go. So that's been a positive day today. You got the Jays back in action tonight, and the positive story right now in the city is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is accomplishing the impossible, Frankie, because this team – listen, we know where they are. We're not going to – you can't just come in here every day and continue to talk about all the negativity and Shapiro and Atkins and what's going to happen and how do you deal with the fact that they're, 9 games under 500 after a win last night. They're way out of it. We all know what's happening here, and we all know that this season is now officially a write-off. And I don't think playing the role of spoiler is something that exists. In fact, I know it doesn't. No fans out there are just happy that the Orioles dropped 2 or 3. So what, the Yankees can pass them in the AL East? No one's rooting for the Yankees to do that. And no one's necessarily rooting for or against the Baltimore Orioles. So you got to find something. And I think the easiest thing to find is Vladdy being red hot, because last night he was a machine. Like, to finish a single short of a cycle is so tough to do. Like, usually you just bloop a single in the first inning and then you're chasing the triple, right?
Yeah,
maybe a double, maybe a triple. He gets his first triple in a couple of years. I think he has 6 now in his career. But the guy's just on fire. He's the hottest hitter in baseball. He's got such uber confidence at the plate. Every time he steps in the box, it's like must-see TV because he's going to do something. It's incredible to see.
For sure. And you know what? Like, I think now trade deadline has passed. You start to look forward to next year and what this team could look like and how in God's earth they are actually going to be competitive. At least there's one story now. Vladdy of 2024, if that can carry over, it's like 2021 Vladdy, 2024 Vladdy. This has to be the guy. And yes, the financial burden will be there at some point for this team. They're going to have to pony up and pay him. Like, now I think he's quashed all the questions of his long-term future, which he probably should have quashed those a long time ago. I never imagined Vladdy was going to be someone who was on the out looking in for the Toronto Blue Jays. But there's your thing. Like, there's your guy you can build around. And I think, Hayes, it goes from pretty good the last couple years, where he's a pretty good player. He's not a superstar. He's not overly elite, but he's pretty good. Like, this is elite Vladdy, and I hope we get to see this Vladdy more often than not moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. It's the guy that, had been hyped for a long time. He was the number 1 prospect in baseball. You remember when he was coming up and when he made his debut, there was it was such a celebration. The fact that he chose the Jays, which he didn't have to. He wasn't drafted. He signed with them when he was 16. The fact that he signed with the Jays, he developed the way he did. He scorched his way through the minors. When he got to Buffalo, it was just like clinical the way he was hitting the ball and the way he looked. And it was coinciding with the Shapiro and Atkins plan of them finally arriving, right? They bottomed out, and then they were going to arrive and take off with Vladdy and Bichette. And he had that unbelievable season in 21, which does have an asterisk beside it because of where they played. They played some games in Dunedin. They played a bunch of games in Buffalo. There were no crowds. It was just a weird season. He was unbelievable, but it was a weird season. This one, I know there's cynicism in this because they're not playing for anything. There's no pressure. But he also has no protection in the lineup whatsoever. None. Like, he has no protection in the lineup. And all he can do is step in and try to continue to grow as a player because he's still relatively young. And that is one thing I will admit, I wasn't willing to accept in the last couple of years because I really thought it was probably throwing him a bone he didn't deserve, that he was still very young, youngest player on the roster. He's been a major leaguer for quite some time, right? And he showed what he was in 21, and then it fell off significantly in 22 and 23 to the point where, as you said, he was a good to very good player, not a great player, not a superstar. Now, he is on the hottest streak of his career, even with 21 being considered. He hasn't done anything like this, and he's been red hot for 2 months. I don't know if this is what he is for the next 7 or 8 years. I don't know if he's now in this category with Judge and with Harper and Ohtani. There's, the 4 or 5 best hitters in baseball. I don't know if he can stay there. That'll be the next challenge. Can he do this for the rest of August into September and then show up next year and just continue it? That's on him to prove it. But if he's even just a step below here, and he gets to a point where he is a guy that can hit 30-plus home runs consistently, have a high 8, around 900 OPS. He's a baller. He plays every day. Every day. He doesn't get injured. He doesn't get tired. The guy loves to play ball. He's a marketable player. He's an affable guy. He's an easy guy to root for. There's a lot going here with Vladdy. It's an uber positive story, and they desperately needed that this year because there's not much else you can point to.
Big time. If you didn't have the Vladdy story, you had nothing. And it looked really bleak, especially for the future and the business side of things. Who's going to buy the jerseys, who's going to buy the suites, who's going to go to the stadium, all that kind of stuff. But I think one of the things we were maybe guilty of the last couple of years is the comparison to his peers around the league. And, you mentioned Judge, you mentioned Ohtani. It's I don't know if Vladdy was going to be in that category with those guys year to year. And Ohtani is such a unicorn. He's so unique. He's so different. He's in his own category. Aaron Judge, for him to do the 62 home runs, that's in a different category of its own. It almost felt a little bit unfair to say, well, why isn't Vladdy doing that? Maybe Vladdy was never going to be that. But if Vladdy can be, in that next tier, kind of pushing up to that, I think that's exactly where he lives. And on a good year to a great year for Vladdy, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, and that's a really good cornerstone piece. And, that's where the reality sets in is at some point, they're obviously going to have to make a call on him. There is such a link between the Blue Jays and the Maple Leafs where it always seems like we're talking about these young players with tons of talent, and what's connected to it are two things. How is the team going to do with them as a cornerstone, and will the team pay them? What are they worth? Now, the difference obviously is there's a hard salary cap in the NHL. There's not Major League Baseball. You can adjust your payroll in Major League Baseball, but there are significant penalties if you go over the tax, and it certainly makes sense to have flexibility when it comes to your payroll and when it comes to your budget. But that's the case here with Vladdy is you get to this offseason, and I think him being this hot, and if he can continue this through August and into September, and by the end of the year, you can look at it and say he was a definitive top 10 hitter in baseball this year. And that's what his stats are right now. You look at where he ranks throughout the American League, throughout the major leagues, pretty much across the board now when it comes to his slash line, home runs, everything. It's elite at this point. They have to make a decision on what they're going to be after next year, because Mark Shapiro just told us this week their plan for next year is to be competitive. That would lead me to believe you're going to keep Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
World Series competitive, Hayes. Championship competitive. Not wild card, sneak in last week of the season competitive. Let's make that very clear.
Right. That's what he said. He said championship competitive, yes, which I think all of us collectively roll our eyes that they can get to that point. But that's their plan. Okay, you've laid it out. That's what your plan is. You're going to be championship competitive. If that's the case, then Vladdy's going to be a part of this. If you're keeping him for next year, I think you got to sign him this offseason and make sure he's just a part of your program moving forward. You got to make a decision this offseason with Vladdy, and him being this hot, I think is helpful for whichever direction you're going to take. Now, again, Shapiro, I think, gave us the answer. But this is where ownership has to get involved. Ownership needs to know, what is the plan beyond 25? All right, Mark, you want to be championship competitive next year? What if you're not? What if it's a disaster again? What if it's worse? Then what are you going to do? Are you going to bottom out for 4 or 5 years? And if it got to a point where ownership stepped in and put Shapiro's feet to the fire and said, forget 25. I know what you think you want to do in 25. What are we doing in 26, in 27, in 28? And if he doesn't have an answer for you, then A, he's not the right guy. You got to find someone who will give you that answer. But if his answer is, if it doesn't work in 25, we're going to bottom out, that's where the door might open. And I know this is the last thing Blue Jay fans want to hear right now because he's so red hot. I just said it's all about positivity, is where the trading of Vladdy and the value he would bring you because of the season he's having. Like if they determine at the end of this year, you know what's in our best interest is I'm going to pull a 180 on what I just said on August 6th, and we're actually going to bottom this out. And we're going to realize we can't keep up with Baltimore. We can't keep up with the Yankees right now. But by 2028, we're going to be back in the dance. You put Vladdy up, you would get a fortune for him right now, the way he's playing.
I get that, but that's never going to happen.
I know it's not going to happen because of what Shapiro likely just said. And if that's not going to happen and you're committed to winning, then you got to sign him this summer. Like then throw your fans a bone here and say, we're watching this guy put up great numbers. He's a guy we've seen developed, grow in front of our eyes. He's a guy that wants to be here. You know, at least commit to that plan. You know, give us something where it's a committal beyond 2025, and I think that would be the case if you were to find a way to come to terms with Vladdy.
Without Vladdy, you're not competitive in 2025, you're not competitive in 2026, and you're probably not competitive in 2027. And if you go to ownership and you say, okay, our plan now is to pivot, we're going to sell high on Vladdy because we're going to bottom this thing out, you know what I think ownership would say? Okay, well, you're gone because why am I going to give you another 4 years to do this thing? Like, you just had 9 years to do it. You were going to build around Bichette. You were going to build around Vladdy. And now, you know, who knows where Bichette's future would land if they were to do something like that. But with Vladdy out the door, it's like, yes, I understand you're bringing in good pieces, but you don't get to build around those pieces because you just couldn't do it with the pieces we had. So that would be admitting all the mistakes that you made. I think they're at the point where I agree with you. It's like Vladdy's having this good year. You need to try and lock him up so that at least you could say somehow to ownership or to the fans, you know, hey, maybe 2025 we take a little bit of a step, but hey, look at that. We were pretty close. So now in 2026, we're just a couple minor tweaks away. And, you know, Vladdy's a big part of that, and he's here for the foreseeable future. Like, you can try and sell this thing a little bit more. I can't envision a world where they admit to all the mistakes and by doing that say, we need another go around at this. We need to start it all over again.
I agree
just
with
won't
you.
Get that.
But I guess that's what I'm saying is it's on ownership then to step in here and demand that answer. Or they have to come up with it. It's their team. Come on, like Mark Shapiro is the president and CEO. I know he represents ownership and the board and all that kind of stuff, but he's not literally the owner of the team. And he does have bosses, and that boss can always manipulate a game plan. Like we always hear it. I want full autonomy. I'm the GM. No one has full autonomy. Nobody. The only one with autonomy is the owner. That's it in any sports league. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're Bill Belichick, Greg Popovich, Mark Shapiro, it doesn't matter who you are. There's an owner on top that can ultimately make the call. And I guess that's what I'm calling for is make a call here because Vladdy, look what he's doing. Look what he is. Make the call. Because if it is in the best interest of this organization, as painful as it would be, and it would be a massive, massive marketing gamble, right? And you'd be really pissing off a lot of people, but it might be in the best interest of your team long term. That's what we've been crying for in this city forever. That's what we were talking about. Like, we pumped the tires of the Florida Panthers. People in Florida, they love Jonathan Huberdeau. Love them. Third overall pick, Mr. Florida Panther, 115 points. Bill Zito said, great, shove it. Guess what I'm doing? Wait till you see this guy I'm bringing in. And is anyone pissed off at Bill Zito now that Huberdeau's in Calgary? Nobody
Number
is.
one GM in the league.
Number one GM in the league. And obviously it would not pay off immediately if you traded Vladdy. But if it's in the best interest of chasing a World Series, then it's incumbent on you to do it because I think that's, again, bringing the Maple Leafs into this. They haven't had that courage to be like, we're changing this. We're going to move off this philosophy because they're fearful that it will fall apart or fans will get pissed. And as a result, fans, they got even more and more upset because of the lack of activity and the lack of proactivity. And again, with Vladdy, I'm not sitting here saying trade him. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you've got to make a decision this offseason. You have two choices, in my opinion. You either concede it's not good enough, it's going to take us years to get out of it, and we got to take advantage of this incredible asset that built him up significantly this year, that still has another year of team control, plus we'll sign wherever he goes possibly and get a boatload in return, or sign him and commit to him. Don't waver. Don't say we're going to see what happens, and then after 25, maybe it doesn't work out. We got to, then he's just going to walk for nothing. He's going to walk, and then you're going to concede we're brutal, and we got to reset the whole organization. You got to make the call this offseason.
We know the call.
Especially considering how well he's playing. You have to.
We know it. The call is going to be they have to sign him, and they probably are going to sign him.
If that's the play, then sign him.
I wonder how much in the back of their heads, because they have so many moving parts here, like they have to basically reconstruct the roster. They're going to have to fix the bullpen. They're going to have to hope that they can find some pieces for the rotation. Not to mention the biggest piece of all is to find more hitting and protect Vladdy in the lineup and add a little more of a boost. Think about all these things they have to do. But I wonder in the back of their heads, Hayes, if there's a little bit of a thought to, if we give this guy the mega deal with term, with financial stability, are we going to get this version of Vladdy? Like, do we get the very inspired, very motivated version? Like, that's not a shot at him. That's just the reality that comes with a long-term deal with a lot of money, guaranteed. What are you getting? And especially if it doesn't, go well around him with the team, like, what does that look like for Vladdy for the long term in Toronto?
That's ultimately going to be the question, and that's on him as a professional athlete to realize what he's found here. His swing has been changing over the course of the year. I was watching videos today. His swing, in April compared to where it is now, he's made adjustments. He's found something, and it's been a roller coaster career for Vladdy. It's never been rock bottom. He's never been anything but a good player. Yes. It's not like he was a disaster at any point. He's always been a good player, but it's always felt on tap like this guy could be a great player. Like he could legit be like a top 5 bat in baseball, and that's what he's been now consistently for 2 months. This isn't hyping up a good week or a good series. This is months in the making where this guy's been red hot, and he looks great, and he's so confident, and he did it again last night, and now 20 straight games with a win or with a hit. And I just think it's in a position now where I agree. If Shapiro's making the call and ownership's in lockstep with him, and it's like we're going for it in 25, then Vladdy's got to be a part of the program beyond that. And I think you throw a bone to your fan base and you say, we're going to figure that out. We're going to make sure he's here, and we're just going to keep continuing to try to retool and get this correct. And
yeah, and there's also a world. There's also a world, Hayes, where Shapiro and his management team lock up Vladdy for a long period of time. I don't think Vladdy is going to be attached to Shapiro and Atkins, meaning like Vladdy could be here for, who knows, call it another decade. Doesn't mean those guys are going to be just because they're the ones that signed him to this deal. Like ownership could turn around and say, Vladdy's not exclusive to you. Like Vladdy was going to be here anyways. Vladdy was a very good player. We're still going to, see who else can build this team. Like they're not exclusive together for the future of the team.
Right, exactly. And Vladdy's a young guy. He's in his mid-20s. If he's going to be a very good player for the next 7 or 8 years, then he's probably, he can fit into any plan you're going to have, right? Like and he can be kind of rebuild proof in terms of his popularity, in terms of this being an example of that. Even if it's going to be ugly for a while, if Vladdy stays red hot, you're going to keep people captivated because people like the guy. And because what he's doing right now.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, though. I wouldn't be surprised if Vladdy signs his long-term deal. A lot of optimism. 2025 doesn't exactly go to plan. And then it's like you got to sell Vladdy on, okay, it didn't happen this year, but within 3 to 4 years, like we're going to have it for you, and hope that he stays kind of sharp and dialed in, which I'm sure he will, because like you talked about, he's a professional, he's changed his swing and all that, everything that goes with that. But that's probably pretty likely, because it seems like it's far-fetched to believe that this team is, championship caliber a year later after what they've just gone through.
Yep, I agree. I totally agree with you. All right, so I'm texting with, or I was texting with right before the show, because that video has gone viral, the Oilers in the room after they lost Game 7 in Florida. And it's heartbreaking video. It's incredible TV, though. It's incredibly captivating. Like, it's the losing team, that's been in the shadows for over 100 years. We've all seen the winner. We all know what the winners look like. We've always wondered kind of what does it look like inside the losing dressing room. Well, the video's out there. We'll play some of the clips. But I was texting the O-Dog. I said, you got to come on and talk about your experience in 02, because he referenced it forever, how awful it was being in the room and hearing Jerry belting out commentary about how great the champs are, how great the crowd was. And he said it was exactly what he went through, like the exact same thing, and that's what the Oilers had to go through. So I think the O-Dog's going to join us here in a few moments. We'll get the O-Dog on here.
Amazing.
He wants to talk about that viz. He's going to talk about his own experience back in 02, and it's going to be flashbacks, man. This will be PTSD for O-Dog, because he's said it a million times on this show, man. He was shaving his playoff beard, and Jerry was yelling, Steve Yzerman, come get the Stanley Cup.
It's kind of messed up that the only time you've called him to come on the show so far this summer is to just relive some of the worst experiences.
It is pretty greasy. It is kind of greasy, but we haven't had him on for a while. It's his show.
We'll talk about other stuff.
It's still his show. He can come on. We'll get him going on a bunch of different things.
We'll talk confidence meter, all that stuff, I'm sure.
We'll get him rocking here. Don't you worry. Yeah. We'll make sure he's in good spirits. He's a good Canadian. He's ecstatic for the 4x100 meter. Right? He's jacked up. He's loving what Canada's doing over in Paris. So the O-Dog's coming up. Herm Edwards coming up on a number of NFL storylines as well. Steve Phillips on the Vladdy scenario moving forward. How great he's been. What has he seen? What kind of adjustments has he seen out of Vladdy? And can Vladdy possibly keep this up throughout the rest of the season, next year, the next 3, 5, 7 years? That and more still to come later this afternoon. Frankie Corrado's in here. I'm Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. Drive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Frankie Corrado, the O-Dog, will join us here in just a moment. Get his take on a number of things, including this video that's gone viral here of, and it's heartbreaking to watch, man. It's like, I'm not an Oilers fan. I'm not from Edmonton. I have a great appreciation for what they did, how they battled all year, how they battled throughout the playoffs, down 3-0 in a cup final, and you lose 2-1 Game 7 in Florida, and you got to go into the room, and like the emotional swing from what the Panthers were doing on the ice to what the Oilers were doing in the room, it's just astonishing. I mean, it really is. It's the purity of sports. There's got to be a winner, got to be a loser, and this video went viral. It's silent in the room, which would not surprise you, but you can hear one voice, one very distinct voice. All right, let's roll the tape within the Oilers room after they lost Game 7. All right, so obviously incredibly emotional, but there's Jerry in the background just yelling about Connor McDavid and how great he is. And here's the O-Dog for the first time in a while. Frankie pointed this out, how gutless it was for me to ask you to come on and talk about your own experience in 02. It is kind of greasy now that I think about it. But
that's why you asked me to come on, because I was in that room. And I had to sit there, and Hayes, I mean, we've had conversations off air a zillion times. And if I remember correctly, I was like, we got undressed. I don't remember the despair of everyone just said, we just need to get the hell out of here. Like, there was not a lot of sitting around like that, because I don't know. And I think if I know myself, it would have really driven me nuts for cameras to be in there. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, because it's like once you agree to that all access stuff, you're like, you're behind the scenes, man. You're going to be looking at everything. But I think I would take my stick and break one of those guys' cameras right in half if they, because it's the worst feeling in hockey, period. You have to sit in there, and I'll never forget, I was shaving my beard off. Like, you don't grow a grizzly beard ever. Like, it's like, I have facial hair. I always have. But you got this grizzly beard, and I'm like, I can't look at this thing one more day because there's no meaning to it. And as I'm shaving it, I heard, Steve Yzerman. And then I just, it's like a nightmare.
It is, man.
Yeah, come and get the cup. And you're like, that guy's going to get the Stanley Cup, and we have to leave Detroit and get out of here and go home, and it's literally game over.
It's like the parallels are wild because that was in Florida. You know, it's still Jerry, like 22 years later. That was, you know, like you said, it was in Detroit, Game 5. So you have the home crowd that probably added like a bass to the soundtrack, right? Because they would have been going crazy. You would have been hearing fans going nuts the whole time.
Absolutely. And for anybody that's like never, and I'm not trying to big league people, but for people that haven't been involved in sport, that were bitching and crying that McDavid didn't go out and accept the trophy, like that takes you inside the feeling of what it's like to just have your heart ripped out. And the Conn Smythe, like as prestigious a trophy as it is, you don't want to go out there. You're just going to get booed by the fans anyway. And you're with your team in a crushing moment. And to just like, I just think, Hayes, you got a better understanding of why he didn't go out there to accept the trophy if you just watch that 45 seconds of that tape.
Right. I agree with you.
I think not wired that way, though. Like, McDavid is so wired to be, you know, team first, team needs to win all season. That's all they were talking about. It's never been about McDavid and what he was going to do, you know, personal accolades and stuff. So that's it right there, man. Like, that's McDavid in a nutshell. That guy is team first, and it's not about him.
Yeah, and I think it would have been awkward. Like, I think we knew it would have been awkward, but I think it's always been, like, in a team sport, when you have a guy that's that great, to, like, all his teammates love him and appreciate him. And we've all played team sports. You don't resent the best player. You love the best player, and you appreciate how great the best player is. But I think the best player on any team in any sport, there's always a little bit of awkwardness that they are separate from the team. You know, in conversations about Hart trophies, MVPs, whatever it is. And that would have been the most, like, highlighted example of that. Like, this isn't an award show in Vegas with suits on and cocktails. This is the guy still in his uniform. Yeah. Guys are crying in the room, and he's going to walk in with his Conn Smythe. You know, like, it just, I don't know how.
All it would have been would literally have been a league formality.
Yes.
You just go out there. And it's not like there was going to be this jovial handshake with Jerry and they were going to yuck it up. It would have been like, fine, I'll take it, give it to me. And it's just better. I tried to explain to numerous people, it's just better to not, when you're a losing team in the Stanley Cup and you win the Conn Smythe, it's better off just not to go out there. Because you're just going to get it from the fans. You don't want the trophy anyway. You want it. It's going to look good in the trophy case 30 years later. But in the moment, I'll say it again. That video shows where you are emotionally and where you don't want to go out there and get that trophy.
And the picture, like the picture that you're going to take with that trophy and Jerry, is that a picture you're going to put up on the mantle? Or
no.
You know what I mean? It's like you're crying, you're sad, you're not smiling.
You might 30 years later, just to go along, you put a little picture with the trophy.
Maybe.
But that's it, man.
But you're
that's
I don't even know if you're ever going to look at that picture until 30 years after, because it's just all it's going to do is bring back all those bad memories.
Especially if you don't win one, right? Like if you win, if McDavid and the Oilers win next year, then they look back on that very differently. Right, but if you can't get back on the horse and you can't win one, or they don't win one, then those feelings, like, they're so vivid, man. Like, I would guess if you win a cup, you probably just black out. You know, like you just breathe and you black out. And obviously, it's a vivid memory, the games, and probably when the clock comes to zero and you realize that you accomplished it. But those memories that those players would have in the room. And teams have had to go through it for over 100 years. There's been Stanley Cup winners for over 100 years, which means there's been Stanley Cup losers. Like, those would be even more vivid, I think. You know, not to get too deep, but it would be like you'd never forget how quiet it was in there, ever.
Oh, it's disgusting.
Yeah, you'd never forget it.
The Florida Panthers, they went to the finals, and they were like, we got to get right back there. And they ultimately did. But I'm pretty sure, and I'm not like a loser/quitter type, but when that final buzzer goes, you're like, well, that was my shot.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. I was a realist. I'm like, that was my shot, man.
Yep.
Because and Hayes, we've talked numerous times about Cinderella stories and the idea of getting there. I was like, there is no chance in hell that I'm ever going to be back in this. And it's just natural thinking. You're like, because you're thinking about the grind, the 4 rounds, and to do that all over again. And I was thinking about the Oilers this morning. It's like after I heard the Hyman clip where he's like, and he truly believes it. He's like, I know in my heart we're going to get back here. And I'm like, man, that's tough to do it again. Yep. As good as McDavid is and as good as Draisaitl is, and all, you think of all the X factors on the positive for the Oilers. Like, if Draisaitl was healthy in the finals, did they win the Cup? If Stuart Skinner was just like a smidge better, do they win the Cup? But then you're thinking about, what if a guy gets hurt? It's just it's hard to get back, man. Like, back-to-back years, a team go to the final, lose, and then go to the final and win. I don't know if that happens, man.
Tough to do, man. Really, really difficult to do. And I guess you're inspired by the fact that Florida did do it. You know, there is some inspiration within their own history as a team. The Oilers back in 82, I think it was, or 83, they got spanked by the Islanders, went back the next year, won it. Yeah, and that's, I guess that's what you have to draw off. But you're right. Like, I love the Oilers. I love the way they're built. I love their chances. But you got to play 82 games, and then you got to win 12 games in the playoffs before you're even in the Cup final.
Yeah.
Like, that is a grind, man. And that probably, like they always say, like a picture says 1,000 words. Like, that video probably said more than that, because you're right. Like, as much as it is heartbreak and you're so exhausted, you're rattled, you're bent out of shape. There's a part of them probably in that room that are also reserved to the fact that they may be thinking in those realistic terms. Like, I don't know if we're going to get back. Maybe we never will. Like, look at Corey Perry. You watch Corey Perry in that video. Perry's got a cup. Like, he got one in Anaheim, so he did it. He got there. He accomplished it.
Forget about people saying he's got a cup. He's lost in the finals 5 times.
Yes. Think about
that's
that.
Devastating. All that work to think, okay, I'm going to be a multiple cup winner, and 5 times you got to go through that video and feel that?
With multiple
I can't even
teams.
imagine. Can't even imagine.
He's been in that room with like 60 different players in that position. Think about that. Like, so many different players.
I bet it hurts the same every single time. Like, that cannot be something that you get used to. But I guess, like, if I was going to make the case...
But think about Frankie, his mentality leading up to it. He's got to be thinking, there's no way in hell I'm losing again. You know what I mean? Like, he's got to be thinking.
Odds, right?
The odds are like, I'm back in the finals. There's no way this is happening again. I'm going to pick one off here.
I know. But you know what? If I was to make the case for the Oilers, maybe just bring, like, the optimistic view of things. Okay, Florida was able to do it. Tampa Bay went to 3 in a row. They won 2. Ultimately, they lost the third one. Pittsburgh went to 2 in a row. They won 2 in a row. Like, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. But when you start, and you start looking at the season right now, we're like August 9th, and you think about the 82 games, the grind. Like, every playoff, someone says in the dressing room, you can guarantee on game 1, hey, boys, let's make the most of this because we just don't know if we'll get back here. Like that, and that's constantly in your head, but there wasn't a lot of turnover on that roster. So maybe you think that, the roster's ready to get back there. But it's just, you just never know what could happen. McDavid could get hurt. Draisaitl could get hurt. Like, who the hell knows?
I feel good about their chances if they get back to a Cup final. Like, you always say, learning lessons and all that. Like, I think the learning lesson is that room. Like, that's the feeling you just never want to have again. I couldn't think of anything more inspiring in pro sports. So if they can get through the grind of the season, get through the first 3 rounds, they get to a Cup final, I don't think they'll lose again. Like, I think they'll find a way. And obviously they'll be so talented, they'll be chugging at that point. Who knows who they play against? And obviously you have to have respect for the opponent. It's not even the Cup final I'd be worried about with the Oilers. It's everything that precedes it that you got to get through. And,
you could get bounced in the first round by a hot team. Like, you know what I mean?
It could be Vegas. You could get Vegas. You could
get a bad
Vancouver.
draw. You get a tough goalie. You just get a matchup that doesn't work. McDavid's
which is crazy to think, guys, because a team with the best player in the world, and one of the reasons I do like their chances of picking one off, I mean, if everything stays together there in Edmonton, they have the best player in the world by far, and he desperately wants to win one. And when you have that, I believe you're always going to have a chance because that guy's made it very clear. The individual accolades are great. He's going to get 100 points. He's going to possibly win the Hart Trophy or close to it every year. All he wants to do is win a Stanley Cup.
And guys like that.
If he won one, he'd relax and say, okay, the pressure's off, and God knows what he would do after that. But he desperately wants one. Like we talk about other organizations where you don't hear players even mention anything about anything.
Never talk about it. Yeah, like they want to embrace it.
Nothing ever. It's just like, oh, let's see what happens this season. And it's like, well, what is your season goals?
Well, and that guy is destined to win. Like, that guy wins one. The McDavid, the Lemieux, the Crosby, the Ovi, that player wins the Stanley Cup.
The guy on your right is saying it's taking a little while.
Well,
he's getting Nancy. He's got Nancy on him.
I've got Nancy based on history because you're right. You're referencing history right now. You're absolutely right. The greatest of all time, from Bobby Orr to Gretzky to Lemieux to Sid, they all got one, but they all got one pretty quick. Like, he's been in the league 9 years now. This will be McDavid's 10th year in the league.
Ovi was 32 or something like that,
That's
right?
an example of one. Yzerman's an example of one. And, those are – and Ovi is, in a similar category in terms of, an all-time great top 10 player. So I'll give you Ovi. And you're right. And I'm not saying he's never going to win one. I'm just saying he's not 22 anymore. Like, McDavid's not a kid anymore.
He also had a circus of a team for so long, Hayes. Think about all the coaches that rolled through there, all the first overall picks they had to burn through. Like, it was never right around him. But now it is. So
I'm kind of tired. I got to admit, I'm kind of tired of the Ovi Stevie Y. Like, it seems like such a cop-out where it's like, look at these two guys over here. And it's like anything in life and in sports, you could just point to two guys and be like, oh, that guy did it a different way. And it's like, okay, well, let's just forgive and forget everything that's happened in the past.
Especially Yzerman, because look at the team that guy was on.
Oh, my God.
Like, he didn't do that by himself. He was great. He had Nick Lidstrom on his team.
It's not like Stevie Y dragged the Atlanta Thrashers to the finals.
Right, exactly. Like, he had the best team money can buy. Like, they literally had the highest payroll. They had like 12 Hall of Famers on the team. Like, it was incredible. It was a great story, and he was a Hall of Famer before he got to that point. But, that's not possible in the Cap era. You can't do what the Red Wings did in the late 90s. Like, Shanahan's not coming through the door for free. You're not going to get Chelios and Lidstrom and, hey, Hasek just wants to come play. Oh, cool. Awesome. Like, that's not going to happen. It can't happen in this era. And there's more teams now than there were in the late 90s. So
the modern version of that is buy out Jeff Skinner, sign him for pennies on the dollar.
Exactly.
Victor Arvidsson's hurt all year last year. You could get him for two-thirds the cost. That's your modern version of it.
That's the modern version of Brett Hull and Luc Robitaille deciding to come play for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, that's the modern version of that. So it's a different era, different world. All right, buddy. Good to see you, man. How are we feeling these days? How's the golf game? I saw you last week. You look good? Feeling good? Everyone's buzzing. I posted a picture of you. My DM's blowing up. Everyone's like, who's the guy in the end? He looks great.
No, that's not true.
It is. It's very true.
I heard you guys won a match on the 12th hole, though.
I'll tell you what. We took a couple of guys that claimed to be the champions of the National Golf Club, and we slapped them around that place for fun. And we didn't even play good.
We didn't play well. No,
dude, I was putting like Billy Zalatoris was on serious drugs.
Yeah.
And Hayes didn't wake up and join the match until hole 6, but we clubbed them. It was a joke.
I heard on the 12th green you guys were shaking hands and it was over.
I like this. Thanks for the game, guys.
Concession on 12. Hey, great to see you guys. Great to see you. Do you want to continue to play? It was wild, and he's right.
That was the dagger when you asked the guys if they want to keep playing. Like,
keep playing.
That was sad.
Do you want to press? And they're like, we'd rather just play and have fun. Like, okay, that's fine. But those are the champs. Evidently, that's what they tell everyone anyway. Carlo's Instagram, all it is about his accolades on golf courses.
Dude, that guy's wife and kids went to see him win the Sea Flight. Dude, I said to a buddy of mine, if I somehow qualified for Augusta National, like as an AM, like I just said, you know what, I'm going to play in the USM, and I won it, and I qualified for the Masters, my wife would say, Have fun. We'll see you on Monday. Like, she wouldn't go. She wouldn't go to Augusta National.
I know.
And Gina went to Rattlesnake to watch the Sea Flight putt.
With his kids. And then they did the full championship photo. It was a family event to see the Sea Flight.
I'm happy for the guy. I'm happy for the guy.
I am too, man. I love it. It was turned into a family event. You need everyone. You need your whole support staff to get to the top of the Sea Flight at Rattlesnake. You can't
and
do
I'll
it
tell you what, I'll
the
leave
best
you with
team.
this thought. That pole vaulter that just couldn't get it done, he should be the flag bearer for the country.
He's the flag bearer for Tinder for the rest of the time. I guarantee you that.
He's got an operation going on for sure.
That's a great call. I think in France they're thinking about that closely. All right, buddy. Do it again soon.
Love you guys. We'll
then.
talk soon. See you later.
The dog, Jeff O'Neill. All right, Herm Edwards coming up. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN Plus.
So I know we were talking about the Stanley Cup and how bad it is to lose the Stanley Cup, and there's no denying that. Like, you work towards, that your whole life. I lost in the Calder Cup finals in the American Hockey League. So not exactly the Stanley Cup, but, it's a grind and it sucks. The worst thing, we lost it at home. Their dressing room was pretty close to ours, so we could hear the party going on in their room. The music, the yelling, the shouting, the chanting. That sucked. Like, listening to their party because you're basically sharing walls was awful.
That's tough because you're right. They'd want to get off the ice quick and get to the room, right? Where I think if you win it at home, you're like, let's hang out with the fans. We're all out here. This is amazing. Where if you're in an empty building, because your fans are probably like, all right, we'll stick around for a bit, but we're out of here. We don't want to see these guys party. That means they're getting to the room quicker. That's tough, man. Like, it's just like every sports.
Woo. You hear every woo, every scream. Oh, it's awful.
You have nightmares about that stuff. Like, it would be such a vivid memory that you have, that O has, that the Oilers have. And it sucks. Like, there's no other way to put it. And it's true of every single sport and every single championship game. There's such a build-up. You dream of the winning. You don't even think about the losing, which maybe you're not prepared for the losing. And when it hits hard. Hour 2 coming up. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.